So DJ Carey has been at the centre of many iconic photos, obviously when he won his 5 All-Irelands in particular. But there's another, I suppose, image of him that's now become a bit iconic. It's him lying in what could be a hospital bed. It may or may not be a hospital bed, with a couple of tubes basically up his nose. And that's been shared widely today across social media after he pled guilty to a number of charges.
Yeah.
What were the exact charges that he's pled guilty to?
So DJ Carey, he pleaded guilty to 10 charges of deception, basically that he fraudulently convinced people to give him money saying that he had cancer and that he needed treatment for it.
Yeah.
So he had been originally charged in 2023 with over 20 counts. So basically the charges is that he claimed he had cancer and defrauded people into paying for his treatment.
Yeah, so it's a charge of deception.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen other cases of deception. For example, the famous Carlow Post Office case where somebody, ultimately pled guilty to that charge. And what it means is, I suppose, using deceit to induce money out of people.
Yeah.
Now, DJ Carey, does it need to be described how famous and how successful he is? I suppose it does, but
yeah,
for people who don't know hurling, I mean, he's something like the Maradona equivalent, really, isn't he?
Yeah, I think in recent years, obviously, like there's been other players that had taken up the mantle, and obviously he retired in 2005, so he's retired 20 years, so maybe the younger generation wouldn't be as familiar with him, but he's considered one of the all-time greats hurlers, if not the greatest. He's won 5 All-Irelands with Kilkenny. This would have been at a really dominant period for Kilkenny hurling. He won 9 All-Star awards, several Players of the Year. He captained Kilkenny. He even continued after his career. He managed under 21 Kilkenny hurling side, and I think he was a selector for the Kilkenny senior panel as well.
So you're talking about somebody like the absolute elite of Irish sports people. I mean, there's people know a lot more about hurling than I do, but even I know who DJ Carey is, and I do remember him. And he was a kind of one of those remarkably effective and skillful players, I suppose. He wasn't a big sort of strong athlete. He was, relatively small.
No.
But so I mean, it's an incredible fall from grace, really, is it?
It really is, yeah. He was known for just being able to pick a point from anywhere and his skill, and it kind of reminds me a bit of like Roger Federer in tennis, just known for the kind of the effortness. Yeah, exactly. So and he would have been sort of, I suppose, he would have kind of become a sort of a celebrity in some ways as well, because he had a lot of business interests, which we can go into. And when his marriage broke up, he began a relationship with Dragon's Den. Dragon's Den would have been very big at the time. One of the investors, she was a British woman called Sarah Newman. So they would have been kind of a knit couple at times as well. So he's very well known both on and off the field. And I suppose, but in recent years, it really has gone wrong for him.
So, I mean, he's gone from an absolute hero. I mean, Irish people love their sports people anyway, but like somebody like that, certainly in his local area, the local county of Kilkenny, an absolute hero. I mean, there's no other way to describe him. Now, the contrast with that, for somebody to have pretended to have cancer to get money off people, I mean, that really is hero to zero, isn't it? I mean, there's very few.
Yeah.
It's a very hard thing to defend morally or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And there was 13 victims named in court today, but there were originally over 20 charges. So he pleaded guilty to these 10 counts. The exact charge is that he dishonestly, by deception, induced victims to make monetary payments to him after he fraudulently claimed to have cancer and needed finances to obtain treatment. So those 10 he admitted, but then there was also one count that was entered null prosecute, so that was put aside, that prosecution, but then there was other 10 charges that will be taken into account essentially. He'd been originally using a charge with using an instrument as well to obtain this money, so using a false instrument, to obtain this money. So there was a lot of charges there, and as I said, there's 13 victims, some of them quite famous, including billionaire Dennis O'Brien.
Yeah, Dennis O'Brien, of course, would have owned Independent News and Media before it was sold to Media House, who we work for. But he'd probably be better known as a telecoms billionaire, I suppose, and various other public controversies, of course, that he has been involved in as well would also lead him to be well known. So, I mean, we don't hear the amounts of money at this point.
No, we don't. But I suppose we hear that he claims at the time he was, even though he obviously admitted to not having cancer, his legal team did say in court that he is very unwell and had to undergo surgery recently, and that he has had, has had really ill health, but we don't know what the amount was. These people have been named the alleged victims, and the victims, and they will be allowed time to give a victim impact statement at the next hearing. One of them also was Tony Griffin, who would be well known to Hurling fans. He played for Clare as well.
So, I mean, the dates given are interesting. I mean, this isn't, although the charges were, he was arrested, in 23, was it? Or
yeah, he was charged in 23, but...
Yeah, so the investigation presumably went on before he was charged for a number of months. But the actual deception occurred at particular dates, some of them, over a decade ago, really, is it?
Really, yeah. So 2014 to 2022, so over 8 years. And yeah, and I suppose he would have had, given his high profile on the pitches we talked about, and the way he was regarded by people, and then, his business interests, he had quite a public a difficult time in terms of his company. His assets went into liquidation and all, so that would have happened kind of in a couple of years before 2014. So I don't know whether that may have been used at the time as, he told people he had cancer and he was after suffering this financial difficulty as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think he got in difficulty following the crash, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sort of 2008, and that then takes a couple of years to work out of the system.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a massive debt at some point written down by, was it Allied Irish Bank?
Yeah, it was. It was 9.5 million to nearly 10 million. He had properties at the K Club. He had properties in Kilkenny as well. And he basically had to, I think it was less than 1% that he was left liable for. So €60,000 in the end.
Which was a source of public controversy at the time as well. He was brought up in the Dáil at some point. People asked, did he get an easy time because he was a hurling legend? And, even though absolutely there was no sign that he did from the bank, ultimately, it does show you, though, the power of who DJ Carey was and who his name was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact is that he was, there's a lot of people who went bankrupt during the crash, but there's very few of them that come before the charges for claiming to have had cancer to get money out of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I suppose we have to think back, this would have been at a difficult time. Ireland was coming out of recession when all this was taking place. So you have to put it in that context. But he did tell Ray Darcy on RT in an interview in 2015, I'm not one of those who would say I don't care about repaying debt. You borrow money, it should be paid back. And he said, to whatever extent that can be, I would like to be conscious it has been done. But obviously, he did get a massive debt write down. He also, you're probably more familiar with a thing, it's called a windfall clause. So basically, if his assets or any cash or anything that came his way was over a certain amount, I think it was 50,000, he would have to pay that amount back. But, he did get a massive debt write down. You can't deny that, and I can't imagine how that would frustrate people.
Yeah, and of course, look, debt write downs occurred, and some people have opinions on it, but it's a very different matter than why he's before the courts.
100%, yeah.
Now, why he's before the courts, it is connected with him being a GAA star. I mean, the fact is that there's 13 names, I think, in total?
There's 13 names, yeah. But there would have been, there was obviously over 20 charges against him. So I think, but in terms of what he pleaded guilty and the victims that were called out in court today, there were 13.
So there was 13 people named. And if you or I, went around claiming to have cancer, but you might raise a few quid and I'd probably raise a few less. But
yeah,
you'd be talking you know, you might get the change out of somebody and the Indo might give you a fiver or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't have
like
much
that.
to give you, Niall, I have to say now.
No,
but yeah, I know what you mean.
Look, obviously,
yeah,
you know, ordinary people, you know, they can't raise that huge amount of money. But people, the fact is that he was able to trade off the fact that he was who he was. A
100%.
hurling legend, and I think some of those people have spoken in the past before charges were brought, and you know that's how they approached him. I mean, it's an abuse of that privileged position he had in society.
Yeah, no, 100%, because like you wouldn't be running in those social circles if you weren't, you know, who he is. So yeah, you're right. He did take advantage of that. And, you know, I suppose it's frustrating for people because he did receive free legal aid as well last year when he was charged.
Yeah.
You know, so
I mean, it frustrates people because some people view that GA people in particular, is always the view, but it's not just that people, there is a sort of golden circle in society and some people get treated differently than others. Now he pled guilty. It's at a relatively early stage. He didn't speak today, did he? Or did he confirm? Did he say guilty to each charge?
He did, yeah. No, that's the only time he spoke. So it was actually, he had pleaded not guilty, and it was back today for jury selection. And basically his defence team told the judge there will no jury be required today. So then the 10 charges are put to him and he replied guilty to each one. But other than that, there was no evidence heard. So, you know, it's back on October 29th for sentencing. It was heard in court that victim impact statements will be required, and also I imagine we might hear more details about the money and what the circumstances were.
Certainly we'll hear more about the sums, and if 14 people are involved, you can see how, you know, even a decent amount of money from each of them would rack up a huge amount of money in total. I mean, 14 people suffered fraud, you know, that's a lot of money, and especially, as we said, some of them seem to be people with access to a lot of money as well. Now, when at this point, as people will know, he's pled guilty. So what you get then is the jury is, you don't need a jury because he's admitted to the charges. It then effectively goes forward for a sentencing. There'll be hearings before you hear, you know, what sentence the judge gives. They'll seek medical reports. I think there's mention of a psychological report would be drawn up, obviously, as well. Obviously, his health issues were raised, and it was said that he has had health issues, but there's no sense that, you know, that when those health issues began, are they in more recent times or did they go back at the same times? We don't know that, but we might come to know that.
Yeah.
Did they give a further date and details of that hearing?
Yeah. So it's the end of October 29th, and yeah, it will be back then. They did mention victim impact statements, so you obviously don't have to do one, but you have the opportunity to do one. And yeah, I assume there'd be more mitigating factors. As you said, they did mention today they called them genuine and very serious health conditions, but we don't know yet when they occurred. And I'm sure there'll be other mitigating factors brought in, and then obviously the judge we don't know if he'll be sentenced then, but you know, we'll hear a lot more then, basically.
Yeah, you'll hear more. I would doubt he'd be sentenced at that particular date, but you will hear some of the details of what's going on. Yeah, look, it's an incredible story, and of course it was one of those stories that was floating through the ether for a while, wasn't it? That you hear in journalistic circles. I mean,
it was, yeah. It was because I suppose, like, you know, he went from, you know, he was, as you said, like really held in such high esteem by obviously everyone in Kilkenny, but also hurling fans and sports fans in general because his immense talent. And then over the years, then, you know, he sort of had a celebrity, I suppose, in itself. There were stories written about his relationships, then his significant business difficulties, the fact that he got in a massive debt right down. So that was obviously a bit of negative publicity, and then obviously it's ramped up, and then these stories were doing the rounds, these rumours, and obviously then it resulted in the charges and today's guilty pleas. But, you know, within the last year, like Patrick O'Connell, our journalist with the Sunday World, did a story last year I think it was a month after he was charged, about how there was these fake articles gone up online that he had died.
Yeah.
And he spoke to a family member who was, obviously concerned about him, saying this is absolutely not true. I think it turned out, or it was suggested by a legal expert, that they were AI generated articles. They're not done in Ireland now, but the family had to put up with that. But so there's been a lot of mad stories going around about DJ Carey, but obviously we know that this is true, about that he did fraudulently claim to have cancer and got this money out of people.
Yeah, and we'll hear more details of it then, and no doubt we will cover it then as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Eimear.
Thanks, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.